All right. Welcome back, viewer. Mr. Wayne here. We got our suit on, and we are ready to go over the next part of Master Key System. Right now it is 13:40. That's 1:40 p.m. Wednesday, June 25th. Let me just see it right there. We got our notifications telling us, yeah, we had the Master Key System today, and we are ready for what Mr. Handel has for us today. We already got our workout in. We did back and biceps today. We did a little bit of shoulders, mainly lateral shoulder raises, because we did rear delts too. We were focusing on our rhomboids. And when we got back home, we took our shower, got our amazing drink, got our creatine and electrolytes. And now we are ready for this. We didn't have a contracts meeting today. The lady running the meetings, she had other things she needed to get done, so we'll have to wait till next week for that. And you know what? We're able to get started. We'll get started with real estate and being able to make our payment to Rockwell to get our license. We had to get our insurance and our registration taken care of, and that took a lot longer than what anybody would like it to take, because I live in a different state and all my information is still in another state, right? And in order to move forward real estate, we did contact the high school, the district that we went to high school in the other day, to get our diploma transcript mailed to us, because we need that. And you know, that's on its way. Our registration is on its way. And you know, I went to sign up for third-party gigs like DoorDash. My account's disabled with DoorDash. A lot of it was my fault, things that happened in the past that I didn't take care of, that I should have. My vehicle's too old for Uber. They won't accept it. Instacart has a wait list. Spark, I thought I could drive with Spark. The only way you can work with Spark if you don't work with Walmart, because they call it a conflict of interest. And it is what it is, you know. It's like the amount of money. Now I know I needed it to get taken care of, because the last thing we need is to get pulled over and not have a valid registration or insurance and lose my vehicle and have to pay even more money that I don't have. You know, I work at Walmart. They pay me dog shit, and you know, opportunities that I've messed up. It's been a very rough last couple years. You know what? It could be worse. Yes, it could be better, but you have to remember it could be worse. And like I said, we know we'll eventually get there. And Walmart, man, it's just every week is just getting harder and harder to get through. Now, a lot of these, I have had other opportunities come up when it came with, let's say, driving a bus. I went to the school district to put an application for driving a bus, but I need my high school transcript. And it's on its way, right? It's on its way. It's different when you're in a situation as compared to being able to see that situation from a different angle, right? Like when I went on my retreat, going on that retreat got me out of that routine, and it allowed me to see where I was heading from a different viewpoint. And it gave me clear insight, like, you know what, that is definitely not the kind of life that I want to live, right? Working at a retail, working at a Walmart. Like, that's not the life that I want. Like, there's, like, I need more, right? Like, everyone, as we've talked about before, our values, the things that we find of value as people. Now, we all have our own values, and in our life and our lifestyle is going to be in accordance with what we as individuals find as valuable. Right? I know even Mr. Hanel said it in one of these parts about wealth. He says, what is enough for one could be painful lack for another. Right? Like, it all depends on a person's individual values. And some people want to do more and be more in life than some others. You could have that person that's, they're solid and okay with just being comfortable, right? And living a life of security, which there's nothing wrong with. If that's the life that you want, then that's the life that you want. Then there are other people that want to do bigger things, that want to take risks, that want to provide for others, right? For example, you have your entrepreneur with the idea, and he works very, very hard and makes sacrifices to make that idea come to life. And throughout the building of that idea, he creates opportunities for others. He provides the security for others. He pays the bills for others, at least provides the resources for the others to be able to pay for their bills. And the person that doesn't want to be the entrepreneur, that doesn't want to do any of that, but just wants to work at a place that they're comfortable with, they're happy to work at, they trade their time, their attention for a position in this company that the entrepreneur created. The entrepreneur pays them for the service, right? But the entrepreneur was the one that set in motion the service to begin with. And those are completely two different, you could say they're both people, but they're completely different mindsets, to completely different levels of sacrifice, to completely different thought processes. And again, that goes back to value, right? What do you define as valuable to you in your life, and what it is that you want? What are you willing to do for the things that you want? And in Walmart, retail, working for somebody 9 to 5, I can't do it. I'm not a person that can do it. I know as an individual, I know I could do more. I know I could be more. And because of that, it's like that internal understanding that I can do more with what I have been given, right? It's like how the Bible, how God has instilled talents within us, right? And the talents, he gave people a specific amount of talents, and the ones that used their talents were able to multiply and create more, while the others decided to bury their talents, and they were not rewarded for what they were capable of doing. And I believe that somebody that's capable of doing something, because they're capable and they know they are, that makes it their responsibility to do it. It makes it their responsibility to do it. And I just feel I have this responsibility that I know that I have, and I have to fulfill it for me, right? So I could live throughout my life and be happy, more. I don't want to use the word grateful, because I am grateful for what I have. I know there are people with less, and I know, like I said, the experiences that I've had and the mistakes that I've made, and because it takes one mistake could hurt a lot of things. It could hurt a lot of things, and you know what, we all make mistakes. Everybody does. It's just part of life, right? And being human, like we all make mistakes. Even Christ said, why do you call me good teacher? Right? Only God is truly good. Only the Father is truly good. Only the infinite intelligence that we all came from is really the good one. All of us are just, we could strive for perfection, we could strive for divinity, because that divine spark is within us, regardless of our sins, you can say, our mistakes. We're still divine in the eyes of the Lord. And when we admit how filthy we can be, or how filthy we are, or mistakes that we've made, or how bad we can be as humans. It's like that's what opens up the gateway to the divine that exists within us. It's like the polarity of our own nature, because we are conscious beings, right? We live in these bodies. We're attached to these bodies. We're connected to this being, and we all are influenced by, people call it the reptilian mind, the reptilian part of the brain. We all have this lower self to overcome in order to step into that divinity, that higher conscious self of which we are. The part of ourselves that is created in the image and likeness of God, and the part of ourselves that can embody the characteristics of God and embody the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of God in the flesh, and live and walk as gods in the flesh, because we operate from the wisdom of a higher source. I did kind of go off track right there, didn't I? But what going back, we got our transcript on the way. There are other opportunities that aren't far, and I know this chapter will not last forever, and we just got to keep getting through it. We just got to keep getting through it. And it's the one thing that's tough, what's tough the most is how I am beginning to deal with my customers, because, realizing how important it is that you're doing what you want to do. We have to be able to do what we want to do. We have to develop and create a lifestyle that will be revolved around the things that gives us joy. Because I'm just, the longer I'm there, the less happy I am, and the less happy I am, the more I don't want to serve, because it's not what I want to do. And we know through service, that's where greatness comes from. It comes from being of service, and we have to serve in the things that we want to serve in, because it is interfering with the way I provide service to my people. And that's reflecting on me as an individual. And that does not represent who I am as an individual. But like I said, when you're in it, right? When you're in it, you're in it, and it's hard to act different than how you're feeling on the inside. It's hard to put on a front for the customer when you don't want to do that, right? You want to be you. You want to be real. You want to express yourself how you actually are in the moment. And that can be done through being happy about what you're doing. When you're doing something that's just not fulfilling, you don't feel fulfilled internally, and that unfulfillment reflects and goes out around you. I'm seeing it happen, and it proves the reality of what we're learning in this system. Because what are we learning, right? What's the main secret? It's our mental attitude, right? It's us. It's consciousness. It's our consciousness. Our consciousness is the center of where the life that we desire to create, the life that we wish to live, comes from. It comes from us, right? It comes from our mental attitude. It comes from how we think and how we feel. And when we're engaged in doing things that we don't want to think about anymore, that we don't want to be emotionally involved in, it creates a character, it creates an attitude, it creates like a negative, what's a good word for this? It creates a persona that's not conducive to who you are in the environment you're in, and it's affecting the very person that you need to serve as as a person, right? We're here, like I mentioned earlier, we're here to serve each other. We're here to be here for each other, right? We're just by nature, by natural law, we're social beings. We need to be around people. We need to be involved in people's lives, and we need to be right in the level of involvement we create depends upon our mental attitude. Am I explaining this right? I'm sure you understand the point that I'm making, because you could subconsciously push people away when you're so engrossed in a negative place. And it's up for us. It's up to us to fix that for ourselves, right? And like we said, we can't be, how Hanel said, we know, since it's consciousness and it's our mental attitude, we can't be, I don't want to use, of course we can't be defined, right, by a situation and circumstance, but we can't allow ourselves to, what is I guess we can say defined, to be influenced, to not, right? It's up to us to change it. It's our responsibility to change it. And I'm here to tell you, it is not easy changing your life. It is very, very, very hard. It is a lot harder than what people may think of it to be. It is very, very difficult. Now, obviously, more financial power will change that. But when you're in a position like me, which a lot of people are, when you don't have the financial power to act on the choices you want to make, you have to, right, this is where investments comes in, saving for the future, right? It's your seed money. And the process of that transformation for people that don't make a whole lot but are working their ass off, making sacrifices to go through that phase, it is very, very, very hard. And success is very, very hard. It really, truly is. Especially for men. It is so much harder for men than it is for women. It really is. Because women are naturally taken care of by men. Men need to be strong enough to not only take care of themselves, but it's inherently built within them to want to help take care of women. Now, obviously, they want to help and take care of their brothers too, but they know too that as men, it is our responsibility to rise up to meet the demands of our own life and take care of ourselves. That it's just what it means to be a man. And, you know, one day at a time, eventually we will be there, and we will be there to be able to really, truly help others in the way that I know that I can. Right? It'll include this ideal. It'll include this higher ideology, this higher way of thinking that we're growing into and understanding. It'll include providing opportunities for other people to be able to take care of their families, to find work, to be able to pay their bills. It'll include lots and lots of things. And, you know, we just gotta trust the journey, Wayne. You gotta trust the journey. Same thing with you, viewer. We have to trust the journey, because as we are told, our lives will be a reflection of who and what we are. And like, I do think about that too, because a lot of us are living lives that are not reflecting who we are. And again, that goes back to the financial portion of our lives. In order for us, this is why money is so important. This is why finances are so important. So you can afford to express yourself. So you can afford to be who you truly are. And you can take action on the desires and the thoughts you want to bring to life. Okay, with all that being said, let's go ahead, let's get started. We're already about to be 20 minutes in. We are on part 22. We are on the last 3 weeks of this program, and it's been over 5 months. We're on our, is it 5 months, or has it been 6 months? Okay, because let's say we did the first part, first week, 3, 4, finishing the fourth part. We're in it. No. Whatever. It doesn't matter. We're 5 months in. We know for a fact we're 5 months in. We're at more than 5 months in. So let's go ahead. Let's get this going. So introduction, part 22. He tells us, he says, in part 22, you will find that thoughts are spiritual seeds, which, when planted in the subconscious mind, have a tendency to sprout and grow. But unfortunately, the fruit is frequently not to our liking. The various forms of inflammation, paralysis, nervousness, and diseased conditions generally are the manifestation of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and similar thought. The life processes are carried on by 2 distinct methods. First, the taking up and making use of nutritive material necessary for constructing cells. Second, breaking down and excreting the waste material. All life is based upon these constructive and destructive activities, and as food, water, and air are the only requisites necessary for the construction of cells, it would seem that the problem of prolonging life indefinitely would not be a very difficult one. So ultimately, what it sounds like he's saying, right? He's telling us that the life processes, this vessel of which we all live in, which we know is the body, the temple of the living God. He says these processes, the vital processes of this body, are dependent upon the construction or the constructive creation of cells, our body to be able to continually generate and repair the cells of which we are made of. We know this reparation, this restoration, this creation of more cells is dependent upon providing our body with the proper nutrients that it needs to live and survive. And he's saying that these constructive, the repairing of the cells is dependent upon the water, the food, and the air that we take in. And he's also saying our body's ability to, I was going to use the word discrete, but I don't think that's, to get rid of, right, the waste material, the parts of the air, the parts of the food, the parts of the water we drink that do not serve the body. Our body will move that into waste, and it'll get rid of it. So the prolonging of our life depends upon our ability to be healthy, essentially what he's saying. Our ability to be healthy, depending upon the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, and the water that we drink, is going to be conducive to a longer, prolonged life. He says, however strange it may seem, it is the second or destructive activity that is, with rare exception, the cause of all diseases. What he's saying, the main cause of disease is the body's inability to get rid of toxins, to get rid of bad air, bad food, bad water, right? It's our body's inability to do that, which mainly creates diseases. And all this is happening mainly on the physical side. He says the waste material accumulates and saturates the tissues, which causes auto-intoxication. This may be partial or general, which makes a lot of sense because we know when we train, and we exercise, our body is using this material. Let's say sugar, for example. Sugar is not nearly as bad as the world is making it out to seem. Sugar has actually been found to be the body's main source of energy. Your muscles, when they contract, they're using sugar, right? They use ATP, but that ATP is created out of creatine and sugar. So you need the sugar. If you don't eat sugar, if you're, let's say, if you eat mainly proteins, for example, your body will literally, because it's not getting the main source of energy that it needs for muscle contraction, your body will literally go through what is it called? Nucleogenesis. Holy crap! I used to I would explain this all the time. I gotta find out what that word is, because your body will turn the excess amounts of protein that it has within its system and literally turn it into sugar, right? Because all the protein that you take and consume, your body is not using. It's only using what is necessary for growth. But if you have an excess amount of protein, nucleogenesis, creating new atomic basic. No. Holy crap. That's going to be bothering me. But it goes through a process of taking the excess amounts of protein that it needs and creating energy with it. Just like excess sugar, when you have more than enough sugar in the bloodstream than your body even needs for muscle contraction, for energy usage, that level of sugar, you'll just have high levels of blood sugar because not all of it is being used. And the longer you stay like that, in that state of excess amounts of sugar in the bloodstream, you will develop type 2 diabetes, which is excess amounts of sugar than your body is using for the use of energy. Let's continue. I'm gonna have to look that up because in my NASM book, I have it right here, but I gotta go through a lot of information just to find it, because that's going to be bothering me. Let's move on. It says the problem then before us. Okay, hold on. This may be partial or general. In the first case, the disturbance will be local. So he's telling us the disturbance of our body's inability to get rid of waste is going to be found in one local area. It's going to be in one main area. Let's say if the kidneys aren't getting rid of toxins the way it should be, the problem will start within the kidneys. He says in the second place, it will then affect the whole system. And if the kidneys don't get fixed in time, if it's not given the things it needs for proper repair, then it's going to start affecting other parts of the system. It'll start affecting your liver. It'll start affecting your nervous system. Who knows how many things it'll begin to affect. It's no different with the car, right? If you have a problem with your oxygen sensors, now you have a problem with the air to fuel ratio in the system of your vehicle and how it melds the air with fuel to create combustion. Then now you have a problem with the combustion of your engine and the power of which it creates. And then you're going to have a problem with the amount of gas your car is using. And then that in turn can create problems with your engine, problems with your vehicle. It's no different with the body. One issue can and will, over time, start developing issues in other parts of the body. He says the problem then before us in the healing of disease is to increase the inflow and distribution of vital energy throughout the system. And this can be done by eliminating thoughts of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and other destructive thought, which tend to tear down and destroy the nerves and glands which control the excretion and elimination of poisonous and waste matter. So he's saying obviously we want to increase the inflow of the level of nutrition we take, right? So we're providing this vehicle, this vessel we have, with the proper nutrition it needs to cure itself, to fix itself. But he's saying through the distribution of this energy too, throughout the system, by the influence of the conscious mind, by the influence of our thinking process, our mental attitude. And we do this by releasing thoughts of fear, worry, care, anxiety, right? Any type of thought that may fall on the negative spectrum. Because we know our thoughts influence the way our body is functioning, right? If we're thinking thoughts of fear, we may go into the fight or flight system, and the body will respond by releasing adrenaline into the body, right? So we need to work in two ways. We need to work by changing our thought. We also need to work by changing what we put into this vessel in the form of fuel. Now, it's interesting because I have been watching a lot of Gregg Braden. And Gregg Braden talks about the power of our DNA, our human DNA. And our DNA is made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. And what was the fourth one? See, and one thing, oh, I don't have it in here with me. We'll just look that up too. And one thing that I've been really understanding, especially for my program, and even for me too, is systemizing my thought. I know I talked about this before. We have to systemize the information that we have, so our thought process is organized, so our thinking is organized. Because if we don't organize the information that we have no reference structure, we have no backbone, no foundation from which to think. Because we can know all these things, but we have to be able to attach each thing to another thing that we know. Or we have to be able to attach the information we have to other information, so the foundation of our thought is solid. Well, let's go. DNA. Structure. Okay, so double helix. Building blocks or DNA are adenine. It's either adenine or adenine. I believe it's adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine or cytosine. I will have to look up the pronunciations of those. And these are made of nucleotides. And those chemical, we'll put chemical. Chemical structure. And look, it even says right here too, these strands are made of repeating units called nucleotides, each containing a sugar, right? Even our DNA is made of sugar, which is a phosphate group, and one of four nitrogenous bases, which are the adenine, guanine, cytosine, or thymine that we just talked of. Okay, I understand that, but what is the basic structure, basic chemicals of which even these DNA is made of? I know one of them is carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. Or was it? Okay. Put basic. AI is just pulling up the same things. My gosh. Okay, and what are these made of? I know you can see it too. This is starting to frustrate me. DNA. Okay, we'll put chemicals that make DNA. Maybe that'll pull up something different. Still pulling up the 4 chemical bases. 5. Here we go. Elements. Come on, Mr. Wayne. It's the elements. So the 5 elements that make up DNA, this is what we were looking for, are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Phosphorus was the one we were missing. These are the elements that form the nucleotides, which are in turn what get together to form the basic building blocks of DNA. But Greg Braden was talking about the human DNA and how it's influenced by our emotions, by our thinking, which we know is a spiritual aspect of man. And he says when a person is in a negative state, it actually constricts the DNA. It constricts our DNA, which in turn is going to restrict our ability to express ourselves. But when we're positive, when we're in a state of gratitude, when we're vibrating at a higher frequency, so to speak, the DNA of which we are literally expands. And through the expansion of this DNA, it gives more freedom of expression, it gives more freedom of thought, it gives more freedom of our emotional selves, of our spiritual higher selves. In all this, the functioning of the DNA is dependent upon the conditioning of the spirit of which we are within. He's saying our DNA is responding to a frequency. It's responding to a vibration. And that vibration is nothing more or less than the spiritual conditioning, our internal state, right? Our internal condition. And what has also been found through Hans DNA is that they took DNA. They took glass. They took some glass, like a glass. Excuse me. They took a glass dome, and they sucked everything out of that glass dome that they possibly could to create a vacuum. So that vacuum was empty of air, empty of everything, but is still contained electrons and is still contained photons, which are particles of light. But we know the electron is the most basic building block of atoms. We know that the electron exists on the outside of the nucleus of an atom. Now, these electrons and photons permeate all space, right? Regardless of there's a vacuum or no vacuum, there's still going to be a presence of a photon and an electron. But what he was saying through this experiment, they took a human DNA and they inserted this human DNA in this glass vacuum dome. And they found that the particles of light that were inside of that dome literally melded, you can say, the photon, the particles of light melded around the structure of the DNA. Like every inch, every possible inch of what this DNA composed of, everything of what the DNA is, right? Its entire structure, the amount of space it took up, everything was replicated by the photon, and that photon would transfer and shoot out into the universal mind in accordance with the structure of that DNA. And that DNA was pulling in and shooting off photons of light that were structured around this DNA structure. It's It's a phenomenal idea. It's a phenomenal thing to understand, because we know that not just from the double slit experiment that particles, that these electrons will formulate and group themselves in accordance to how we are observing it to be. Light, particles of light, do the exact same thing in accordance with our DNA and the structure of our DNA. And we know the structure of our DNA from what the science is showing today is dependent upon, and how Hannah is explaining to us now, by our spiritual conditioning, our thoughts, our emotions, what's going on within our mind, what's going on within our body. All this influences what we can create in the external world, and how we set the law of attraction to work for us. He says, nourishing foods and strengthening tonics cannot bestow life, because these are but secondary manifestations to life. Now, yes, we can agree with that they don't bestow life itself, but they sure as heck do influence the state of health that we are in. No matter how much you think about being healthy, if you're not eating in accordance to what it means to be healthy, if you're not feeding your body the necessary requirements for health, you are not going to be happy. You are not going to be healthy. He says the primary manifestation of life and how you may get in touch with it is explained in the part which I have the privilege of enclosing herewith. Gosh damn, we spent 20 minutes on the introduction alone. Okay, let's continue. So that's the end of introduction. Let's get started with part 22. He says, knowledge is of priceless value, because by applying knowledge, we can make our future what we wish it to be. When we realize that our present character, our present environment, our present ability, our present physical condition are all the result of past methods of thinking, we shall begin to have some conception of the value of knowledge. Now, I've lived enough of my life to understand the reality of that situation, and how important it is to apply knowledge that we have obtained, and to obtain knowledge that is sound and legitimate in wisdom, because we know wisdom is the principle of God, right? It is a changeless principle. Wisdom is natural law, the workings of nature. If the state of our health is not all that could be desired, let us examine our method of thinking. Let us remember that every thought produces an impression on the mind. Every impression is a seed which will sink into the subconscious and form a tendency. The tendency will be to attract other similar thoughts, and before we know it, we shall have a crop which must be harvested. If these thoughts contain disease germs, the harvest will be sickness, decay, weakness, and failure. The question is, what are we thinking? What are we creating? What is the harvest to be? If there is any physical condition which it is necessary to change, the law governing visualization will be found effective. Make a mental image of physical perfection. Hold it in the mind until it is absorbed by the consciousness. Many have eliminated chronic ailments in a few weeks by this method, and thousands have overcome and destroyed all manner of ordinary physical disturbances by this method in a few days, sometimes in a few minutes. So he's talking about going to the basic law of cause and effect and applying the process of visualization to set this law in motion for ourselves. So he's saying visualize yourself in the health that you want, and through the act of visualizing and embodying that image of yourself being healthier, you will then attract the things necessary to you, the foods you need to eat, the information you need to have, the actions you need to take to manifest that health in your life, again, because it all starts with consciousness. He says it is through the law of vibration that the mind exercises this control over the body. We know that every mental state is a vibration, and we know that all form is simply a mode of motion, a rate of vibration. Therefore, any given vibration immediately modifies every atom in the body. Every life cell is affected, and an entire chemical change is made in every group of life cells. He says everything in the universe is what it is by virtue of its rate of vibration. Now, this is very interesting because we know our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system, is under the control of the solar plexus, the subconscious mind. That is the part of ourselves that we have no control over. It's the Father within. It's the kingdom of heaven within. It's the part of ourselves that works regardless of our understanding of it or not, right? Whether we know about, right, as we have said before, we don't need to digest our food. We don't need to make our nails grow. We don't need to make our hair grow. There's a power within us that's doing that for us. There is a power, there is a systematic function that is beyond our own personal conscious control. Or we don't need to think about breathing all the time. We breathe automatically. But by the conscious mind and the central nervous system and our ability to influence the workings of this mind, right? We could conscientiously breathe harder than we need to be breathing. We can make the choice to eat or not to eat, right? We could make decisions in these decisions inform and influence the workings of this internal mind within, right? Which again, why it's so important for us to maintain a positive, higher vibratory state within the conscious mind. So we're not restricting, as we just talked about with the DNA, we're not restricting this body, right? We're not providing a negative influence on the functions of the body that we live in. He says, change the rate of vibration and you change the nature, quality, and form. The vast panorama of nature, both visible and invisible, is being constantly changed by simply changing the rate of vibration. And as thought is a vibration, we can also exercise this power. We can change the vibration and thus produce any condition which we desire to manifest in our bodies. It says we are all using this power every minute. The trouble is, most of us are using it unconsciously and thus producing undesirable results. The problem is to use it intelligently and produce only desirable results. So again, like he opened up, and how we've been learning through this entire program, we have the power within us through consciousness and through our mental attitude and through our thought processes. Whether we know about this power or not, we are setting it in motion, whether consciously or unconsciously. And the way we set it in motion, whether we're doing it deliberately or not, is going to determine the results which we get in our life, whether they're negative or positive. He says this should not be difficult because we all have had sufficient experience to know what produces pleasant vibration in the body. And we also know the causes which produce the unpleasant and disagreeable sensations. All that is necessary is to consult our own experience. When our thought has been uplifted, progressive, constructive, courageous, noble, kind, or in any other way desirable, we have set in motion vibrations which brought about certain results. Now, I want to make clear his idea of progressive from this viewpoint, right? He's talking about progress. He's talking about moving forward. He's talking about gaining things that are constructive for our lives. He's not talking about this BS progressivism that we're dealing with today. He's talking about legitimate growth and progress. He says, when our thoughts have been filled with envy, hatred, jealousy, criticism, or any of the other 1,001 forms of discord, certain vibrations were set in motion which brought about certain other results of a different nature. And each of these rates of vibration, if kept up, crystallized in form. In the first case, the result was mental, moral, and physical health. And in the second case, discord, inharmony, and disease. You can understand then something of the power which the mind possesses over the body. He says the objective mind has certain effects on the body which are readily recognized. Someone says something to you which strikes you as ludicrous, and you laugh, possibly until your whole body shakes, which shows that thought has control over the muscles of your body. Or someone says something which excites your sympathy, and your eyes fill with tears, which shows that thought controls the glands of your body. Or someone says something which makes you angry, and the blood mounts to your cheek, which shows that thought controls the circulation of your blood. But as these experiences are all the results of the action of your objective mind over the body, the results are of a temporary nature. They soon pass away and leave the situation as it was before. So he's saying right there, when we split the subconscious from the conscious mind, he's talking about this conscious mind has influence over the subconscious functions of the body. But as the subconscious mind passes its focus from one thing to another, right, the rhythmic functions of the subconscious mind remain the same. So this rhythmic motion that the subconscious mind has is a solid foundational function of the body, which provides life and vitalizes the life of the body. While the conscious mind, through its thought processes, through its focus and what it focuses on and what it believes things to be, right, this vibration, so to speak, the vibratory action of thought, the electrical signals that are sent throughout the central nervous system by the thought, influence the functions of the subconscious mind, but it does not create the functions of its own. Right? It doesn't create the functions of the subconscious, it influences it. The subconscious functions in a manner completely separate from the conscious mind, from conscious thought. He says, let us see how the action of the subconscious mind over the body differs. You receive a wound, thousands of cells being the work of healing. I think that's supposed to say begin. It says this is what the book is saying. He says thousands of cells being the work of healing at once. But if we change it to begin, thousands of cells begin the work of healing at once. I believe that's supposed to be begin. He says in a few days or a few weeks, the work is complete. You may even break a bone. No surgeon on earth can weld the parts together. I am not referring to the insertion of rods or other devices to strengthen or replace the bones. And we could include, he's not talking about screws either, or putting screws in one part of the body to add one bone to the other. He says he may set the bone for you. The doctor may set the bone back in place for you. And the subjective mind, the infinite intelligence within us, the mind of the subconscious, he says, will immediately begin the process of welding the parts together. So he's saying that the intelligence within us, what we need to do is put one bone back in place where it belongs. In the great healing power of the subconscious mind on its own will begin to weld the parts together on its own. You may become infected with a dangerous germ. Now, hold on, did I skip something? The bone may... I did skip. Okay, hold on. Your body will immediately begin the process of welding the parts together, and in a short time the bone is as solid as it ever was. You may swallow poison. The subjective mind will immediately discover the danger and make violent efforts to eliminate it. You may become infected with a dangerous germ. The subjective will at once commence to build a wall around the infected area and destroy the infection by absorbing it in the white blood corpuscles, which are the cells, the white blood cells, which is supplies for the purpose. So he's saying this subconscious mind, the body mind, infinite intelligence within will automatically, it provides the white blood cells for us. It creates the white blood cells for us. And these white blood cells, if we get an infection inside of us, will go to work to destroy that infection on its own. And it does all this outside the realm of our knowing about it or not. He says these processes of the subconscious mind usually proceed without our personal knowledge or direction, and so long as we do not interfere, the result is perfect. But as these millions of repair cells are all intelligent and respond to our thought, they are often paralyzed and rendered impotent by our thoughts of fear, doubt, and anxiety. So he's telling us that these white blood cells that are under the control of the subconscious mind, they get influenced by the state that the conscious mind is in, by the state you are in. If you're fearful, doubtful, negative, and if you're in a negative emotional as well as mental state, it is interfering with how well these cells perform. And we are no different, are we not? I just opened this entire video talking about how difficult it has been to be working in a place that you do not want to work, and to do it like as if you want to be there, right? Because it's interfering with how I as a person, myself, is working and providing customer service, right? I'm not doing it in a way that I used to do it because it's not something that I want to do, right? It's putting me in it's a struggle not to be in such a negative place mentally, because we're focusing and pushing so hard to transition into something else, and we have to be patient with it, right? It's a patience that we don't want to have, but we have to have, because this transition in my resources, it takes longer than as if I already had tons of money that I could already throw into something else. Right? We don't have that luxury yet. Eventually we will. We have to be patient with the process of it. But our body and our cells act in exactly the same way, right? If they are being influenced by our negative internal state, it's going to influence its ability to naturally perform its own specific task of what it was created to perform. It's amazing, as we are told, as within, so without. That means as we are as people, it's going to be the same as how our cells act and are as an individual themselves. He says they are like an army of workmen, ready to start an important piece of work. But every time they get started on an undertaking, a strike is called, or plans changed, until they finally get discouraged and give up. Oh, man. So ultimately, from this information, even for our body, even for the sake of the amoeba that make up us as humans, is dependent upon our ability to create our life and our lifestyle around the things that fulfill us as a person. Because our ability to create a life and lifestyle around our fulfillment, around the things that fulfill us internally, that in turn is going to fulfill the life of this organism of which we are composed. If we're negative, stressful, doubtful, that influences the functions of our cells, and that in turn will deteriorate the body. If we create a life around us that is fulfilled, happy, conscious, thoughtful, that in turn is going to reflect on the functions of the cells of which our body is composed of. And these functions will be happier, healthier, will live longer, and that in turn will prolong our lifespan. Which shows exactly why, when you listen to Les Brown and he talks to us and he tells us that we have to go after, we have to, in other words, we have to pursue our happiness. We have to pursue the things that we desire, that we know will make us happy for ourselves, for self-fulfillment. In other words, we have to go out after the things that will fulfill us internally, as if our life depends on it. And he says, why? He says, we do that because our life does depend on it. Our life depends on us creating the life that we desire to live. Our life depends on us being fulfilled as humans. Our cells depend upon us fulfilling ourselves as humans in this life. He says the way to health is founded on the law of vibration, which is the basis of all science. And this law is brought into operation by the mind, the world within. It is a matter of individual effort and practice. So he's saying all of our health is dependent upon our vibratory state. And our vibratory state is depending upon the conditioning of the conscious mind, our mental attitude. That mental attitude is dependent upon what we think. And our thought process is dependent upon what we know and understand. It's dependent upon our blueprint. So ultimately, our blueprint is the main key which sets all these other forces in motion. Our mental blueprint will set in motion the direction, right? It'll set us in the direction of the life that we are achieving or pushing for. It'll be the blueprint out of which our subconscious thought patterns will emerge automatically. Because remember, 95% of our mental life is subconscious. Right? When we're focused on something, and we're not focused so much on our thoughts, we're just focusing on something other than what we're thinking, right? Our subconscious thought patterns are going to be what take over. It's going to be our subconscious, how else can I say it? It's going to be our subconscious ways of thinking. Because we know that our attention, right, is our conscious mind and our attention can only be placed upon so many things at one time. And throughout all these different avenues of our life, it's placed upon. The main thought process that will go and line up throughout, right? The golden line of thought, so to speak, that will be present throughout all the different things you focus on is going to be your subconscious thought pattern. He says it is a matter of individual effort and practice. Our world of power is within. If we are wise, we shall not waste time and effort in trying to deal with effects as we find them in the world without, which is only an external, a reflection. Now, yes, I do agree with that, but I also agree we're learning about this law and the law of thought, and we know that each thing we deal with in the external world is a cause that has been set in motion by somebody else. It's an effect. I had that mixed up. Okay, this system we live in, the things we deal with in the external world, they're all effects from somebody else's cause, right? Because we all live in this world together, and we have to respond to it accordingly. by setting causes in motion ourselves so we could reap certain effects, so we could deal with a certain situation that somebody else had possibly set in motion. It's like a counter. It's a counter effect. You're being a counteractive cause to a cause somebody else set in motion. He says, we shall always find the cause in the world within. By changing the cause, we change the effect. Every cell in your body is intelligent and will respond to your direction. The cells are all creators and will create the exact pattern which you give them. Therefore, when perfect images are placed before the subjective, the creative energies will build a perfect body. So ultimately, don't do anything with your own personal mind that will interfere with the rhythmic function of the infinite mind that is already within you, the workings of the subconscious mind. Right? He says the brain cells are constructed in the same way. The quality of the brain is governed by the state of mind or mental attitude, so that if undesirable mental attitudes are conveyed to the subjective, they will in turn be transferred to the body. We can therefore readily see that if we wish the body to manifest health, strength, and vitality, this must be the predominant thought. The predominant thought is your subconscious habits, your subconscious mental habits, your just habitual mental attitude. We've already gone over that. So we know our brain cells will rewire themselves in accordance with our predominant mental attitude. He's saying our brain cells aren't the only ones that do that. The cells of our subconscious body do that as well. The cells of which we are composed of. Now, I know I mentioned it before, because we know even all the cells of our body are receiving and putting off vibrational frequencies. They're giving off and receiving energies. And I had mentioned that the functioning of the brain cell and the structure of the brain cell and the nature of the brain cell is, with it being what it is, it receives the vibration of consciousness, which permeates all of space. That is why we, right, our seat of consciousness is centered within our own brain, right? We have to listen to the body or the mind that permeates the subconscious mind, the body mind. But ultimately, it's the brain itself harbors and expresses a conscious being, right? It receives a certain vibration within the universe that forms consciousness itself. Well, the cells of which our body is composed receives a different level of vibration. Am I explaining that correctly? I know there are probably only a handful of you that will understand the point that I am coming from. I mean, like this information anyway, only a few people are going to understand it to begin with. He says, we know then that every element of the body is a result of a rate of vibration. This is exactly what I just said. So all the cells of which we are composed are vibrating at their own frequency, at their own specific rate, which makes them what they are. In our brain cells are vibrating at a specific rate, which gives off and receives the vibration of consciousness. Again, this is why consciousness is centered within our brain, and not so much from the cells of our body. There's a different mind that governs that. He says, we know that a higher rate of vibration governs, modifies, controls, changes, or destroys a lower rate of vibration. Hold on, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. He says, we know that mental action is a rate of vibration. Okay. Now, moving forward, we know that a higher rate of vibration governs. We just went through that. He says we know that the rate of vibration is governed by the character of brain cells. And finally, we know how to create these brain cells. Therefore, we know how to make any physical change in the body we desire. And having secured a working knowledge of the power of mind to this extent, we have come to know that there is practically no limitation which can be placed upon our ability to place ourselves in harmony with natural law, which is omnipotent. So we know nourishment, health, in providing this vehicle, this vessel with the proper foods, water, and air that it needs. And through this nourishment, it's going to build the body that it needs to build, right? And the health that it needs to have. We know the subconscious mind is working to do that on its own automatically. And on top of that, we know the conscious mind, us as individual conscious beings, and through our habitual predominant mental attitude, influences the workings of the subconscious mind. So we know that we have to overcome any negative state inside the conscious mind, because those negative states, those negative thought patterns send electrical signals throughout the central nervous system, which is attached to the sympathetic nervous system and is going to influence how every cell in our body responds, right? Because it's influencing for the good or for the bad how these our workmen, right? Our cells, how the things that make up our body act and how they perform. Our habitual mental state influences that. So not only do we have to work with the subconscious mind on the level of which it naturally works in, we also have to work with the subconscious mind on the mental level to make sure we're not interfering with the natural work it already does. And we know that even our brain cells, he's saying our brain, right? Our brain being, as he told us, the most wonderful piece of mechanism of the body, because it is the control center of the vital regular movements of the body. Right through the conscious mind, we in our ability to visualize is what creates the brain to be what it is. And the structure of our brain determines our behaviors, because we're wired. We're wired to be that way. We're wired to behave that way. And we can legitimately, through consciousness alone, wire our brain to be what we want it to be, to express a character we desire to express. He says this influence or control over the body by mind is coming to be more and more generally understood, and many physicians are now giving the matter their earnest attention. Dr. Albert T. Schofield, who has written several important books on the subject, says, and I quote, so Dr. Albert says the subject of mental therapeutics is still ignored in medical works generally. In our physiologies, no reference is made to the central controlling power that rules the body for its good, and the power of the mind over the body is seldom spoken of, end quote. Now, obviously, this is something that was written over 100 years ago. The science of today's science of psychology, of physiology, there is a lot of science today, more and more proving this to be true. But at the time that this was written, which certain men like Hanel already knew about, right? The action of the mind, the human conscious mind over the mind of the body, the subconscious mind. This Dr. Albert is saying that mental therapeutics was still being ignored at the time that they were doing this in, and its ability to influence the functions of the body were seldom spoken of. They were rarely spoken of. When you look at it today, it still is kind of like that. but the information is spreading. It's more and more out there because people are still relying more and more on synthetic ways of producing cures, of healing themselves. They're still relying on synthetic ways of changing their life when everything can be done and fixed naturally through nature alone, through the cooperation of natural laws, both mentally by your mental action and both by your physical actions. He says, no doubt many physicians treat nervous diseases of functional origin wisely and well, but what we contend is that the knowledge they display was taught at no school, was learned from no book, but it is intuitive and empirical. This is not as it should be. So he's saying that even the way we're living today is not the way. It's not the way. We're doing it wrong. Society is doing it wrong when it comes to the reality of curing diseases. Our society is doing it wrong. And what are we doing today? Relying on pharmaceuticals and how it's all over the place, and how a certain group of people, big pharma, they roll the pharmaceuticals. And I was watching some the other day how Rockefeller, one of the billionaires, richest men in the world at the time, and his family being one of the royal bloodlines that control essentially everything, that is known to control everything, set in motion to keep people sick so they could bank off of pharmaceuticals, right? They're making you sick and providing a synthetic cure, which is not really helping you to get healthy. And this man, Dr. Albert Schofield, what Mr. Hanel is explaining us with vibration, is ultimately saying we're doing it wrong, and we're still doing it wrong today. He says the power of mental therapeutics should be the subject of careful, special, and scientific teaching in every medical school. So he's telling us that the basis of what medical schools should be teaching is the power the mind has over the body, and the power of aligning ourselves with natural laws, right? In understanding the subconscious mind, understanding the need for us to eat healthy, breathe clean air, to drink clean water, because this is going to postpone the growth and activity of the cells of which this body is composed of. And obviously the responsibility we have as beings, as humans, in controlling the conscious mind, so we're not interfering with the process of which the subconscious mind undergoes. Right? We have to be essentially we're co-workers with nature, and we're co-workers with the mind that pervades the entire body. He says we might pursue the subject of maltreatment or want of treatment further in detail and describe the disastrous results of neglected cases, but the task is an invisible one. The task is an invidious one. Reading that, I had to pull out the Quimby manuscripts. Man, I have to get wealthy. I have to, so I can do this, so I could actually do this, and I could live my life and not be barred down by choices because I can't fund it myself. Because you gotta know this book. Look at this. Chapter 17, God and Man. And you know what this man opens it up with? What is disease? Right? He says this question involves much speculative reasoning. Some suppose that disease is independent of man. Some think of it as a punishment from God for the wrongs of our first parents. others that it comes from disobeying the laws of God. Now let us analyze the above and see if there is any truth in these statements. If there were not a living creature on earth, then there could not be any disease. Otherwise, disease must have had an existence before man was created. So he's saying disease wouldn't exist itself. Disease within itself is nothing. Disease comes about by there being a form of life for disease to even be able to exist. The life must exist first before disease can even follow. It's like the principle of good, right? Right? The principle of good or the principle of bad, right? The principle of bad is the negative. It is the opposite of good or light. Light is what I'm saying here. The principle of light. Darkness only exists in the absence of light, but where there is light, there can be no darkness. Same thing with here. Disease can only exist as long as life exists. And he's saying, otherwise disease must have had existence before man was created. And if so he's saying, if disease had life or already was before life was, God created it for some purpose, right? So he's saying if God or if disease was around before life was around and health was around, then disease was created for a purpose by God. And all that Christ taught was what? With the Spirit of God, it's the overcoming of disease, the overcoming of sickness, and to grasp the reality of health. He says, according to man's reasoning, disease is his enemy. And if God created an enemy to destroy you, God cannot be man's friend, as it is taught. And we know disease is not a friend, right? We know disease is an enemy of us because a disease has the power to destroy the internal functions of the body. And these functions are the very functions which vitalize our life in general. So he's saying if God created disease, then, well, I don't want to say it, but ultimately he's saying God is not 100% on our side, which we know is not true. God cannot be man's friend, as it is thought, if God created the disease to destroy us. But we know disease cannot be around unless there was a life first to exist for it to be around. He says, thus the idea that the benevolent God has anything to do with disease is a superstition. And the question comes up again, where does it come from? So he's saying, where does disease come from? And he says, I answer, it does not come, it is created, not by God, but by man. So he's saying disease is something that is not from God, because as we're learning from these, with the mind of God in us, working through the subconscious, has within its function to always be functioning towards health. And we have to align ourselves with the functioning of it so we're not interfering with how it works, right? How God works within the body. He says disease is not created by God, it's created by man, because we know God is for health. That is why the Spirit of God cures disease. That is how Christ was able to cure disease, by opening the pathway of health within the man that believed with faith the disease was cured. Oh, I gotta earn our time. We gotta get our time so we could go through all of this. How powerful, how powerful. In other words, there is no reason why we should ever be sick. There is no reason. There is something that makes us sick. There can be no doubt that few patients are aware, continue with the Master Key, how much they can do for themselves. When the patient can do for himself, the forces he can set in motion are as yet unknown. So he's saying when the patient understands, this is what Quimby talks about and teaches too, when the patient understands the power they actually have through consciousness alone and through the thought process and their ability and their oneness with the infinite intelligence, with God, then there is no limit to their manifestation abilities. There's no limit. Whatever they can do is completely unknown. And as Mr. Allen tells us in the message, New Thought, the possibilities that exist within us and how far we can go as humans is unimaginable. Like we have not even scratched the surface as a species as to what we are truly capable of. Even the best, I know I said this before, even the best of the best that we know today are not even scratching, they're still not scratching the surface of what we as humans are truly capable of. Now, why is this so? We know this is so because we have to free ourselves as a people from this financial system that has their thumb upon us. Right? Capitalism isn't bad in itself. It's the existence of the Federal Reserve and the ones that run it. Right? We as a people, we as a society are dealing with the financial parasite. There'll be much more on that in a later time. He says, we are inclined to believe that they are far greater than most imagine and will undoubtedly be used more and more. Right? Again, he's talking about the evolution, the extent of which this power of which we have, of which we are, can go. Right? He says right here, we are inclined to believe that they are far greater, that this possibility that we as humans are can and will be much greater than we currently are, than we can even imagine. He says mental therapeutics may be directed by the patient himself to calming the mind and excitement. So he's saying that we ourselves can set in motion the very thing that'll heal any type of disease that we may deal with. And we do that by setting certain causes in motion ourselves by our own thought process. And in turn, by the law of attraction, vibration, cause and effect, we will reap and create the benefits. It says by arousing feelings of joy, hope, faith, and love, by suggesting motives for exertion, by regular mental work, by diverting the thoughts from the melody, by taking your thought from the problem itself and focusing on the solution, will bring about the solution of the disease you may be dealing with. And as Christ said, what did he tell that? I believe it was the Roman soldier who went to him for help. And he prayed. I don't remember. I believe it was for his daughter. The Roman soldier's daughter was sick. Somebody was sick. And he asked Christ for healing. And they prayed. And Christ told him his faith. It is his faith that is going to make it so. And he's saying specifically it's coming from that man. He's not saying the power. Yes, he says the power comes from me. But ultimately, the power comes from you. You're the one having the faith. You're the one believing. And because you believe, because you have faith, you will set it in motion for yourself. You will access this God-given divine intelligence, this divine power that is inside of you to cure the disease, to heal the situation alone. It is coming from you yourself. He says, for your exercise this week, concentrate on Tennyson's beautiful lines, quote, Speak to him, thou, for he hears, and spirit with spirit can meet. Closer is he than breathing, and nearer than hands and feet. End quote. Then try to realize that when you do, quote, speak to him, end quote, you are in touch with omnipotence. So he's saying to speak to God. Speak to God, because God is closer to you than your own breathing. God is closer to you than your own hands and feet, because God is the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, immortal power that is already within you, that is the foundation of everything of which you are made of, and is the very foundation of all that exists outside of you. All is one. There is only one. And you and I are connected and are at one with the one. Remember, this is how the law of attraction can work to begin with, right? You send out a vibration. It matches a different rate of vibration. And that matching happens because everything exists within the one. The one is everywhere. The one is everything. If you were separated from something else, you will not be able to match with that other thing to begin with. You are connected to that thing by the infinite intelligence, the universal cosmic mind of the universe. You are connected to it, and so is everything else, everything that is manifested in form. He says this realization and recognition of this omnipresent power will quickly, that's funny, it'll quickly oh my gosh. Okay, where were we? It'll quickly destroy any and every form of sickness or suffering and substitute harmony and perfection. He says, stepping into the unity and power of the omnipresence inside of you is what will destroy all sickness and disharmony, and in turn will substitute health and harmony. It'll do that by law. So as Phineas Quimby was saying, disease did not come from God. Disease is something that came from man. For God is always pushing towards health. Its function is always for health and longevity. It is through our inability to cooperate with natural law which brings disease about. And disease cannot exist unless life has first existed. Because if God created disease for us to deal with, then God wouldn't be truly for us. But we know that God is truly for us, because as we have already said, the very function of the subconscious, the Spirit of God within, is already functioning and pushing towards perfect health at all times. He says, then remember, there are those who seem to think that sickness and suffering are sent by God. If so, every physician, every surgeon, and every Red Cross nurse is defying the will of God. Hanel was saying the exact same thing. Phineas Quimby said, and all these other people we'll talk about, even to the extent of Christ, they're all saying the exact same thing. Disease did not come from God. It came from something else. Okay, again, he says, every surgeon and every Red Cross nurse is defying, if God created disease, again, this is what he's saying, if God created disease, everyone in the medical field is defying the will of God. And then he says, and hospitals and sanitariums are places of rebellion instead of houses of mercy. He says, of course, this quickly reasons itself into an absurdity. He's saying how absurd it is to think that way. But there are many who still cherish the idea. And as he said in the part prior, the week right before this, how he's saying the biggest difficulty that we face as a society is going to be our belief in what the universe is to us. Right? It's going to be the belief in what we believe our where we came about. It's the ideology. We need an ideology that is scientifically proven and found in sound law, in reasoning. It's divine reason. Again, reason is Christ. Christ was a reasonable man. His reason was found in the wisdom of God. Why else would Christ be the Spirit of God in the flesh? It's divine reason. It's divine wisdom. We know wisdom was around since the beginning of time, that this infinite intelligence, God, created all things out of wisdom. It's order. It's divine. He says, then let the thought rest on the fact that until recently, theology has been trying to teach an impossible creator, one who created beings capable of sinning and then allowed them to be eternally punished for their sins. And I believe I did share this in one of the prior parts. I had met a Christian brother, and he invited me, he asked me what church I went to, and he invited me to his church, and he was talking about us born sinners. I told him, yeah, dude, I don't know if I believe that. I can't believe that. Because we know if you look at a baby is pure. A baby is pure. Things are born into purity. We were all born pure. It is only by the conditioning of the world which we started to develop and live in sin. Right? It is by the world's conditioning. And then I mentioned Adam and Eve. I said even Adam and Eve were living in perfection. That everything was perfect until something else, which we know as Satan, the devil, until something else came along and corrupted us. We're not born sinners. We were born to be perfect in nature with God. Something else came along and corrupted us. Let's continue. He says, of course, the necessary outcome of such extraordinary ignorance was to create fear instead of love. And so, after 2,000 years of this kind of propaganda, theology is now busily engaged in apologizing for Christendom. You will then more readily appreciate the ideal man, the man made in the image and likeness of God, and you will more readily appreciate the all-originating mind that forms, upholds, sustains, originates, and creates all there is. Quote, all are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul. End quote. I believe that's the same quote that was in The Message of New Thought by Abel Allen. He says opportunity, it's very familiar. Whose body nature is, and God the soul. He says opportunity follows perception, right? You have to understand the opportunity. You have to see the opportunity. And that seeing is a spiritual insight, right? It is an internal understanding, an internal knowing, an internal revelation. He says action follows inspiration, right? When you're inspired to do something, there's something that is inside of you that is moved. And that movement, that spiritual movement, creates external action. Right? He says growth follows knowledge. So we have to have knowledge. We have to have wisdom. We have to continue to grow in consciousness so we could keep growing and setting higher causes in motion. He says eminence flows progress. Always the spiritual first, then the transformation into the infinite and illimitable possibilities of achievement. So we have to grow and expand our consciousness, our spiritual body, and our perception, and our knowing and understanding about the life in which we live. And through this understanding, we'll be able to, essentially, he's telling us we'll be able to do anything. That is the end of part 22. If you made it to the end of this part, thank you for watching. And we will see you next week for part 23.